Okay, so Varsha, thank you for volunteering. I know it's not always easy. I've had a look at your illustrious career. I'm surprised we haven't touched base somewhere along the line, but it looks like you've had lots and lots of fun, especially with some of those online retailers and catalogs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been a firm advocate of good quality data right from the earliest days, and especially now into the world that we're getting in, talking about AI, wanting to build models. I've always said that if your house plans are flawed, your house is going to be flawed. Similarly, if you're trying to do AI on flawed data, it's not going to work. So let me not waste any more time. I'm going to hand over to you. Maybe you can give one or two words about your data journey and then dive into your topic.
Sure. Thanks very much, Drew. And thanks everyone for having me. As I was sharing with Debbie and Drew, I'm a total and utter introvert. So forgive me if I'm a bit slow today. And seeing everybody online, I feel quite privileged to share whatever I've learned. But I mean, I'd love to keep this really interactive because data right now and all the changes that are happening, I don't think there's a guide for it. We're kind of unpacking things as we go. So I completely get Remco. There's a lot of new things, and we have to kind of chart what we're going to do with data. So about me, apologies up front if you hear my dogs going wild. They tend to at 4 o'clock, so please just apologies for that up front. Yeah, I've been in data now for, it's going to be 2.5 decades soon. And I've worked across different types of roles. So I started life as a developer. I was a really bad developer. So then I moved into design. And then I felt I got a little bit better because then I could actually understand the end-to-end process. I think what was really great about getting into data, and it wasn't intentional, it kind of just happened. I did a programming degree and then ended up in data. I found the middle point between IT and business. And I found that really quite interesting. And throughout my career, that's been a theme. So whether I've worked for the big five from a banking point of view, or whether it's been in the insurance space or the e-commerce retail space, that theme has remained. It's always around data is not an IT thing, and it's not a business thing alone. It really is the bridge between the two. And I think the way to derive value is to really embrace that. And part of what I'll be sharing today, what Drew actually shared around all these things around AI, and if you can't trust the floor plans or your house plans, how do you trust your house? It's very much around that. I've taken a different angle on data quality, so forgive me if this wasn't what you're expecting. But in talking to the data science team and some other individuals that I work with, I just found that this is a bit more relevant right now. And it's something I don't think we spend enough time talking about. So that's what I'm going to focus on. So with that, I swear there's no death by PowerPoint, but there are a couple slides just to help structure the thinking. I've got the slides on one side and you on the screen. So if I'm looking this way, it's just for that reason. But please shout if there's questions in between. Quite happy to have it very collaborative. Okay, cool. So that's about me. At the moment, I work in a company called Metis, or Tesserae is a sub company of that, and I head up data. And what's interesting is in this role, I get to kind of all the experiences that I've had in the larger corporations, bring it together, start building a lot of data products, data platforms, data insights. So it's kind of bringing together different data sources, trying to consolidate it, working that whole cloud hybrid kind of infrastructure, figuring that bit out. It really is around how do you architect for the future? And I'm sure you hear that a lot. But I often say the map is not the territory. So what looks good on paper and when you're actually doing it is quite different. So I'm privileged to get to work with that and try and figure this out. So what I want to talk to you about today was data quality and the importance from in an AI perspective. And when we think artificial intelligence, it's not just around the robots that are going to take over our jobs, etc. It's really the simple advanced analytics, the data science models we run right now. So whether you're running a credit scoring model, an impairments model, you're doing predictive analytics on customer behavior, customer attrition, all of that is analytics and part of AI, getting to that predictive space. And data quality is really fundamental to it. So this is the Dharma group, right? So we eat and breathe data quality for breakfast, lunch, and supper. So I'm not going to bore you with all the 7 principles around what good data quality is. But if I look at it from an AI perspective, from my experience, these 3 have been the main things, right? So level of accuracy, that's a given. It's like a duh. Like, why are we even bothering with that? But I just want to share a perspective on it. Reliability of data. I mean, earlier we were talking about ChatGPT, but do we stop to think about sometimes ChatGPT is not up to date? It's a snapshot of data at a point in time, so it's not going to have all the answers. So what does that mean in terms of the questions we ask it? And the one I'd like to spend a bit more time on is data, the size and completeness of data sets. It sounds really obvious, but I want to unpack biases and how does that impact on data collection. Right. So pausing there, check if there's any questions. Okay. So again, I feel like I'm really speaking to the choir. From my previous jobs, when I worked for the big green monster, I had a manager who was really passionate about getting our data quality right. And we found that if you use the word curated data or you use the word data quality, a lot of people in businesses kind of rolled their eyes at you, right? They're like, what is this? And our goal was to improve data quality to get into the KPIs of every single business area. So to do that, he came up with the words qualex and philex. And first I was like, why are you destroying what is like just good quality, completeness of data, accuracy? And he's like, no, create a term that business feels belongs to them as well and they have ownership over, and not something that's foreign and scary. So hence, qualex and philex was birthed. Qualex is pretty much, the completeness of the data according to the business rules, and does it meet those business rules criteria? And philex was the completeness stats, right? Very simple, but it was actually something that worked really effectively. And in that company, it was the first time where we actually got business buy-in at a KPA level to actually put it onto people's scorecards to say, this is what we're doing to drive data quality. So when we do this, I think my takeaway is data can seem very scary to people when you're talking to business about value. Sometimes helping them co-create a language around it, as opposed to us sticking to what the actual language is, just helps kind of bridge that gap. So it was one of my learnings there. The next one was metadata, and it links to fit for purpose. I mentioned that I work with a lot of data science teams. I work with the business intelligence team, I also work with the IT team and the business areas. And business consists of your usual sales, marketing, finance, HR, etc. Now, all data does not have to be at the same level of quality to meet these different requirements. And as I say that, some of you might be swearing me, but that's been my experience. So if you were looking at something that really needed statistical modeling, and it didn't need an individual personalized offering to a targeted individual, sometimes the data doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough. But what's really important is actually understanding what that data can be used for. So for me, what's been quite important in even building out the current world that we're in is that there has to be metadata actually outlining what this data can be used for, and also the levels of accuracy and completeness. So again, if you're doing statistics and you're doing a wide range of data statistics where you just need general variables or themes around what you're trying to derive, it doesn't have to be at 99% data quality. If you're doing a targeted campaign at an individual that has an actual implication that's touching someone, then you've really got to push for the highest quality possible. But taking this kind of thinking into our teams has just meant that they're not so focused on it has to be perfect all the time. It's gone more into can you think up new ideas of using this data, knowing it's at an 80% quality level. And that's been quite a shift in thinking. Okay, I'm going to pause here, check if there's any questions or thoughts. Does anybody vehemently disagree or have different views? Okay, let's see. One nod, yep.
So Varsha, I think your point is well made. If you take even the quality that is required for online retail versus the quality that's required for physical retail are actually very, very different. One has got such a more stringent requirement, the online side, than physical retail.
Completely. And I guess it's just being open to that. I think if you've grown up in data and working with data, you're always aiming for things to be, as close to 100% as possible. But never in my jobs have I ever seen things be 100% perfect. There's always a percentage of error, but it's what's tolerable for the use case that you have in there. Okay. Then the next one is just the measures of reliability. And for me, the ChatGPT comes in here as well. A lot of us are relying on ChatGPT to do certain things, but it's actually, like I mentioned, a static piece of information from a point in time. So there's certain things we'll be very good at. There's certain things it won't be very good at. So here in AI, it's actually about getting the basics right. What I've noticed is sometimes, and this kind of goes to the definition of a data scientist. Some people think of a data scientist as just the person who understands stats and maths and business. But a lot of the times, a data scientist starts from sourcing the data, understanding the data, modeling it, and then actually storing it in some sort of way where they can apply their analytics onto it. So it's really important to get these basics right. And what I've noticed is if you unleash data scientists just to go forth and do what they need to, they're quite brilliant in creating a once-off analytical product. But trying to get that productionized and trying to get all of that rigor in place in terms of ML ops and also just DevOps, it becomes quite a challenge if they don't have that support around them or if they're not taught the rest of the skills. And again, it's stuff that we've all learned. Some of us have forgotten because it's just so obvious that it should be there. But as I see more and more data scientists enter the environment, I find this to be quite a challenge. So on time, and what does it mean for whatever use case you have? The consistency in how you receive that data, so the mechanism for transfer, the format, the naming standards, and one that, if you come from a warehousing or BI background, that's always been a pain, is that if there's a change in source, how is it actually communicated to you? A lot of the times I see these models being developed, and if they're developed as a once-off, something looks wrong or incorrect in the model. And it's this whole exercise to try and figure out where did things go wrong. And sometimes if we just have these basics in place, we actually know, okay, cool. We can point out where we think this error actually was. So for me, the reliability one is really about getting the basics in place. Okay. Checking any questions. Move on to the next one. Now, this is the one that's very interesting for me and quite topical. So when we think about AI, I don't think we spend enough time talking about how do we get that data and what does that data mean. I think we just say, yay, we've got data, we're excited, we can build models. And I don't think we question enough about ourselves, the humans who are applying things to these models, and about how the data was actually collected to get to us. When I was looking up biases, and there's different sources that will tell you a different number, but most of them said there's more than 170 types of biases. And what is a bias? A bias is just a mental framework of how we reference things or think about things. So for example, if I grew up with dogs, I might think that dogs are so much better than cats because I've never actually experienced a cat, right? So and we don't even think about these things. These are actually just ingrained in us. And if you think that there's 170 minimal types of biases, what biases are we inferring in data? And it kind of comes back to the house plan view as well. We are the humans programming or applying the program. So our biases are kind of getting built into models, right? So that's one of the things that I worry about. And for me, it's one of the things that I don't think we've kind of captured anywhere to say we need to focus on it. So to give you some examples, we have confirmation bias, historical bias, selection, survivorship, and availability. For me, all of them interlink, right? And to give you some examples, there was some of the universities overseas that decided to look at the top students in academia and then use that to inform their model to help their selection process go faster. So basically something we've all thought about, right? Program a model with historical data and then have new information coming in and let it do the thinking for us so that we as humans don't need to select these CVs. The challenge was the historical data was pretty much male, a lot of them Asian, who were the successful students. So by applying that model and immediately going into the who are my next set of students, women immediately dropped off that list because they didn't match the model. And other smaller groups of individuals or ethnic groups also dropped off that model. That's one of the examples. Other examples, you think about car safety, and I think most of you would have heard this one, was that if you think about the crash test dummy, it was again based on a male physique, right? When they eventually realized that if you watch the impact of that, a woman's body is different and her organs are slightly placed in slightly different areas, you need the data around women's bodies. Then they put in about 5% of data, but they use the smallest woman possible. I'm a very short woman, but I'm not a very small woman. So it still wouldn't have catered for me. So the diversity in the data set was just already skewed, and it already has an impact, and an actual impact on lives. So if you think about these, I mean, one is impacting people's ability to get education. The other one is impacting actual lives and safety on the road. And then probably another one, if there's any women working in offices, in mainly male-dominated areas like IT, you know the aircon story as well. Aircon variables were set using data around men's information and their body heat and what would work for them. And you left out the female data. Now, these are very binary examples I'm giving you, right? Just male and female. But it gets more and more nuanced, right? Because if you already have a bias and you're selecting your data with that bias, you've already got a problem. And you're actually perpetuating a result or forcing a result based on your own bias. Right. I'm going to pause there because I'm very passionate about biases and I'm always trying to work through my own as well. Any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I have one for you, Varsha. And I completely agree, by the way, on the bias side. There are lots of examples which is going completely wrong. My experience is also that if you have a lot of information coming out of the couple of years old information ChatGPT is using, there's a lot of information which is contradictory. So it's not only just bias, but also it can be contradictory. And then depending on the question you're asking, you get a different answer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at that part?
I mean, I don't really have an answer. I think of it like about things we learned at school, like Pluto being a planet, and now it's no longer a planet. So it was a point in time truth. And I don't think we're good at, if I go back to my technical brain, it goes, hey, that's just metadata, right? Our metadata needs to be up to date to say that's the latest value. But that almost doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? I think there's too many sources, and there's this is not a great thing, but there's malicious intent as well. Because if you look at things like elections, people feed malicious data in to swing election data a certain way. So it's that human element, Remco, that I'm not sure how you deal with. We can deal with it technically with things like state and time being true, but how do we deal with people actually feeding the wrong information into systems? Do you know what I mean?
That's absolutely the question. Also, in my experience, at least, ChatGPT or any LLM, by the way, wants to provide an answer, even if there is no answer. I think we humans are very capable of, at least most of us say, sorry, I don't know, or it's indecisive.
Yeah.
If you're asking ChatGPT, it will always provide you an answer, right? Remember, there's one thing on the web where it says, how many rocks is good for your diet to eat on a daily basis? And the first response was, you don't need to eat rocks. And said, yeah, I'm sure, I read about it. And said, yeah, you have to eat 2 rocks a day.
And see, that's the misinformation. And that's a little bit terrifying, right? Because everyone with the keyboard is also putting misinformation out there. And the machines don't know what is true and what isn't, which perpetuates this as well, the biases.
Can I just add on to the conversation or rather ask a question that I've noticed that more recently, if you use your Meta AI on WhatsApp, or there's usually a disclaimer that you should consult with an actual health practitioner to determine the actual context of your situation, compared to people on social media just sending rather eat this 5 times a day or lemon water, and then you find out your acidity is already high, stuff like that. So I think there is some progress that is being made with having your generative AI things like train themselves based on context. So I think, yeah, it's not all that gloom.
No, as much as I sounded gloomy, I'm hoping this is something we can all solve, but 100%, I think context is missing a lot of the times in the answers they give us. But also, I mean, if you go to, what is that medical one? I forgot the medical site, where everybody goes to Google their symptoms. Most of the time, if you Google it, you'll find you have a life-threatening disease. Because the problem is, again, the data. Mayo Clinic, Mayo Clinic is one of those. You are still an individual, and there's not enough WebMD as well, 100%. You're an individual, and all your data points are not in that model that's been trained. That's the challenge. And while we've got the doom and gloom side, we've also got the other side. I mean, for maybe more than a decade now, Oracle has been building this the medical database as well to try and actually shortcut trying to get to prognosis on different diseases, etc. And they're trying to keep it as a clean data set where medical practitioners can actually put information in and then learn from that. So it isn't all doom and gloom. I mean, if it's done with intent, with trusted sources, which again, data quality, except the humans are trusted sources in this. Yeah, it can definitely add value to our lives. It's just how do we use it? We've got to use it responsibly, and that's what's kind of not spoken about enough. I feel, in my opinion. Yeah, 100% Dimple.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I see Oscar's been typing a message, and I just wanted to check, ask if you had any questions, or if you're struggling to use the chat, if everyone's good. Here we go. Sorry, Oscar says, do you consider there are differences between data observability and data quality, or is it the same?
That's a great question. In my opinion, they're not exactly the same. Observability for me is we're watching the trends, or we're noticing what it is, but data quality has to be defined. So is it going past a threshold that we're not happy with, that doesn't meet a certain requirement? I mean, the medical advice one is a good one. Medical advice should be as precise as possible. Do you know what I mean? So we might be noticing the trends or the relationships in the data, but does it meet the use case concept of what good data quality is going to be? That's kind of how I see it. If that answers the question, Alonso.
I think if I can add to that, for me, data observability is about data in motion, it's data in flow. Whereas what you were talking about as well, Varsha, is very definitely knowing what data I've got. Is it timeous? Is it accurate? Is it correct? And all of the rest. And I think the two are both support each other. If you don't have good data quality requirements or data observability, although you might have the perfect tools, is not going to deliver the value because you're not sure what you're measuring against.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah, completely aligned to that. Paul, I saw your hand was still up. Checking. And probably
Sorry.
So your comment about responsible AI for everyone. I think AI is not the data scientist's job or IT's job either. And I think that's part of the point around ethics in AI as well, that everybody actually has to be responsible for it. Gonna switch to the next bit around, sorry? Hi?
Oh, sorry. I wanted to ask a question about the whole medical. So isn't it that like the whole AI works on the most received answers, and then it tends to give similar answers based on like let's say it symptoms for cancer, 59% were like that, and then the lesser it's more likely to give the most used symptoms. So what happens because the whole point of contextuality, it involves granularity, and we don't have, I don't think, that type of tools to actually individually go to each case for the precision that we need in the medical field. How do we go around that?
Yeah.
While still maintaining the data integrity and quality?
Yeah, no, 100%. So the Oracle example I shared was where it was quite intentional, where the doctors are actually putting in very detailed information to help train those models. So I guess it goes back again to intention and trusted sources. So for me, the thing, and maybe this is just me being, a very trusting person with what's on the internet, where you've got the similar types of symptoms and you got people feeding things in. I think you see it on most social media. We have a lot of people who seem bored and just put data into things just to almost be a bit of a troll, I guess. So it's hard to trust data that hasn't actually been verified. I think maybe, and this is I don't know how long a journey, but it might be quite a long journey. If you had something like blockchain in place and you could say this is coming from a trusted source, and you have that level of governance, then I would trust the thing going, okay, 59% of people actually experience this. But right now, if it's just on the web and it's just collecting survey information, it's very hard for me personally to trust it. I mean, so it has to be a curated data source, like the Oracle one is that's growing. So I'm not sure about our audience makeup, who's from business, who's technical, etc. So thinking about biases, I just went into, what's the implications of getting this right? So if you had to actually pay attention to things like biases, and as a business, number one, it's ethical business. It's the right thing to do. It is a competitive advantage because if your data can actually be trusted and your models can be trusted, and people actually understand the process and how you gather that information, you do become a more trusted partner or value add to other people that you work with. This can be as simple as something like credit scorecards, right? If people understand the process you're applying and that you're removing any features that may skew a result, and you're trying to keep it as agnostic as possible and as fair as possible. So for example, you're taking out the male-female indicator, you're taking out the race indicator as an example to make it a bit of a flatter playing field. Things like that actually make you a more ethical business as well, but it also helps people do business with you. So that's where the competitive advantage comes in. Effective use of operations. I don't know how many of you have received SMSs with offering you the wrong package. I was talking to my brother this weekend, and someone from one of the big telcos called him to offer him something more expensive with less features than what he currently has. And I was like, geez, that's a wasted phone call. And obviously, it's not just a phone call to him. There's thousands of people getting these. So operationally, if your model's not giving you the right results with the right intention for your next best action, then you're actually wasting operational cost as well. So there's a big part about getting your efficiency in. This is not just about good data. This actually has a business benefit. And then the reusability of data for multiple use cases. So you want to do targeted marketing to individuals. You want to improve your service offering to them. So what is it, the naked insurance wait time thing? I keep hearing that ad and I'm like, cool, they're using AI to decrease the wait time. Awesome. So you can use data for different use cases. They're using it for that, but also to target individual markets and segments. But so if you've got a handle on your data and you actually understand how much of trust you can place in it, how it was collected, what permissions you also got. So, I mean, the one thing we didn't touch on was things like POPIA and GDPR, right? So in the process of getting this data, are you clear in your mind how it can be used? And are you storing the types of permissions that you have for it? So if you do that right, you collect once, use multiple times. And that's kind of the best benefit for businesses. Not doing this right, and I think we see this a lot of the times as well, customer attrition. It's quite a competitive market out there right now. All the companies are trying to maximize profit, cut their costs. And one of the most expensive things is losing a customer that you have. So trying to get a new customer after you've lost one takes way more effort and cost than just keeping your current customers and keeping them happy. So the more accurate you can get about your customers and targeting them, the better your models are, the more up-to-date they are, and the better next best action they're going to give you. So that's really critical. The higher cost in operations that we spoke about, and then reputational damage. So this actually happened a couple of times, but I mean, there have been instances where a woman was buying certain vitamins that might be related to pregnancy. And then immediately someone thinks, oh, pregnancy alert, let's send her a next best sell around education policy or something else. And it's incorrect. We've also had cases, not my current company, but in some previous ones, where a phone call was made to a family and the father didn't know that the daughter might be pregnant. So you just open yourself up to kind of the wrong actions when you don't think about how you're getting your data through. So you need to have, I think the context is so important. Just taking facts on, oh, someone bought folic acid and something else, they must be pregnant. Analytics is not as simple as just if then. Do you know what I mean? The whole thing about training the model is you need as many data points as possible and to get to a more accurate answer. The impact of not doing that is just too high. So that is quite a challenge. Pause there, check if any questions. Anyone has any horror stories to share? I think most of us have been there. when the wrong analytics went out. Cool. So then the next bit, and yeah, I probably work with business too much because now I think about short-term tactical wins and long-term wins. But really, there's things you can start doing today, and then there's some things that do take a lot more time and a bit more transformative in actually trying to get us through this whole bias situation, and trying to get us to a level of accuracy. So short-term wins, just the data and clean and pre-processing process needs to be looked at. Again, we have this whole influx of data scientists entering the environment, and a lot of them would not quite understand the full data process. So when we think cradle to crypt, how do we get those steps right? So it's about not taking that for granted and putting in those little fixes that actually help accelerate their work in that space. The second one is around improving data collection. So when we think about those data collection processes, if you're collecting data for analytical purposes or reporting purposes, or even an RPA kind of next best action type of thing, you have to question how are you getting that data, and you have to question the process. Now, in most areas I've worked in, data scientists tend to work alone, and I think data science is actually a team sport. If you put data scientists as groups to actually work on things, you do push and force more peer reviews. And I find when you've got more peer reviews questioning, how am I getting this data? If I look at the features someone is using in that data, do I agree? Am I going to question or challenge anything? And am I going to challenge different biases? Now, putting in peer reviews, and none of these things actually will give you 100% no bias. There will always be a form of bias, right? I mean, that's going to be reality because we're born with it. But having peer reviews and having as diverse a team as possible, and this talks to diverse in terms of their background and their experiences, is going to give you a better chance at uncovering some of these biases. And that's actually what's critical, yeah. And then the last one in terms of short term is ownership and accountability. So I think we mentioned earlier as well, getting your analytics right or getting AI right is not a single person thing. It's not a single business unit thing. It's how do people work collectively. To give you an example of that, the marketing team comes to you and says, we want you to analyze this data and work out our customer segmentation based on this, or a next best action based on this data we're giving you. But actually, you should be involved at the beginning when the marketing team is working out how are they going to collect this data, who is the audience they're sending this to, etc. Because that actually starts to inform the integrity of the models and analytics that you build. So that's what I mean by ownership and accountability. There's a joint ownership and accountability. And then it's, data scientists might not think to talk to the team that's setting up the marketing survey, but it's actually important that you do, because you have to challenge each other around how you're getting their data. Okay, those are short-term wins. Any other thoughts or other things anyone would want to add?
You did mention a bit earlier on the importance of your metadata, and also what I've seen as well is the high turnover rate with data scientists. So yes, you might very nicely explain where the model was built from, how it worked and everything else, but unless you maintain that metadata very, very accurately, as you go through that turnover of data scientists, unless you've got it well documented, you're going to have to relearn those lessons over and over and over as well.
100%. That data dictionary as well, the business terms. And so I think when I think metadata, there's the operational, the technical, but the business metadata is always that lacking piece that we just don't seem to document. And that's really critical in that. I saw someone's hand go up.
Adding to that, some of the business terms, like in retail, cost of sales,
Yeah.
or insurance propensity, if people don't know how those are calculated, they won't have a clue.
100%. And that's why we always go to the technical, but we never stop and go, what's my business meaning of the data science pieces? Ethan.
Let me just see if he has a problem. Ethan has a problem with their microphone. Oh no, you've got your microphone.
Ethan,
Anyone
did you have
else?
a question?
Yeah. Ethan, do you
Ethan,
want to type it out? Yeah.
Maybe Ethan can type his question into the chat or into the Q&A. One of us could read it out.
Yeah.
Maybe while Ethan is getting ready with his question, so what are you saying here on this slide? Do we need to do a data profiling and check the status of our data for any possible cleansing and processing? Do we need to improve how we collect data if it's setting disparate things? We need to look at the central data centering and the ownership. Do we need to assign data owners of these pieces of business units that are responsible for that data? What is this slide saying? Short-term wins.
Sure. And it's all of those things, but at two parts, right? So if we start with the ownership and accountability, it's the normal traditional things. You need a data steward, you need a data owner, custodian, etc. Those roles need to be very clear. But there's another level around, from an AI perspective, there needs to be a bit more accountability around how data actually is, how it enters the organization. So if we have a marketing program that's going to be run and we know that a model is required at the end of it, it's about that joint accountability to make sure we're getting the data in the way we could with the least biases as possible, with as wide a sampling as possible. So it's more related to, sorry, I'm just trying to click. It's more related to, when we think about the data collection and accountability, around these biases in the data. Because what you want to do is build a model that has integrity, and you want to remove these biases as much as possible. So if you can influence and you can work with the people who bring the data into your organization, especially from things that it's almost like a pull of the data, where you're sending something out to customers or clients. In retail, it could be asking about the favorite products and what the uses are, but you still try to question, who's that going to? Is it going to the segment that are parents only? Is it going to a wider segment geographically? You're trying to get as wide a set as possible. And as a data scientist, it's working with the people who bring in that data to ask them all those hard questions. That's what we're trying to say there. Sorry, that one. And these two are linked to each other based on that, because once you get the data and you start building the model, not all features in a model should be there. So we're saying we should question it. So if I add something like gender into a model, am I causing a bias? Am I going to skew this model? Or is it my business model to actually put that in there because I'm actually creating a custom offering for females? Right. So it's a question around challenging this. And data cleaning and processing, that 100% is the standard stuff of what I'm supposed to be receiving, am I receiving that? So is there a level of completeness to it? And then the level of accuracy. So I'm expecting maybe a field to contain certain values from 1 to 3, and it's not coming in that way because I need the 1 to 3 to map to certain business values to do a calculation for myself. That's a business rule I'd be applying in the data cleaning or pre-processing phase before I hit the analytics part. That's what we're trying to say on this one. Sorry, was that Andrew? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, then covered.
Okay. So Ethan,
I think if Ethan is not having typed his question yet, I'm just listening to what you're saying, right? And I 100% agree on everything. But it's also kind of a schisma, right? Right? You are saying you want to make use of all the information available in your ChatGPT. At the same token, because you know that's all biased, etc., you want to work only with your own data within your own organization. So it's kind of two paths you want to walk at the same time. And I think that's the. Sure. I don't know the answer yet, even, by the way. That's one of my. I hope September 9 a little bit more, but this is my thought exactly, right?
Yeah.
You want to make use of everything is available. At the same token, because of the biases, you want to include, or basically you make use of it only of your own data set. That's why you need data cleaning, data pre-processing of your own data, because you cannot clean data which does not belong to you.
Exactly.
So.
No, completely, Remco. And I mean, to give you an example of ChatGPT, I mean, I still use ChatGPT, but I don't use it as a data source. So for example, when I want to write an email and I want the tone to change, or if I want to write, marketing is always asking us for write a blurb of explaining something, I use ChatGPT and I sometimes type it in as, can you change this paragraph to appeal to Gen Y? And then it changes all the words, it changes the tone. I'm like, marketing, is this what you want? Like, can I go for it? So I kind of use it for low risk. Oh yeah, marketing might not agree that's low risk, but in my mind, it's the low risk kind of stuff. Where it's like high risk, high impact, high reputation, then I'm relying on my own data. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of, yeah.
I kind of agree on that one. I'm using ChatGPT, by the way, for a lot of my stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's working for the same. But I'm only using my own data set, because you can create your own data set where it said, this is the only data set you can use.
And yeah, sorry, Remco?
To give it more, to train it on your own data, and to say, hey, this is the only data set you can use. Don't look on the web. Don't go and search your own information. This is what you can use. So it's more using the models than using the data, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it really goes use case to use case for me. And sorry, I wasn't clear. So the examples I was given is where we are soliciting information and gathering data, but we also do purchase data from trusted sources. So if it's a trusted source, then we would, and it can be validated, we'd bring that in. Do you know what I mean? It's more the web stuff, like the wiki pages, that I'm saying, yeah, there it's like, it's cool, but we're not going to bring that into a trusted model. Of thing. Yeah. Ethan, are you winning there? Okay, there was a question from Rob as well. Oh, Ethan, I think we heard you. Can you repeat? Anybody else can hear?
No.
I think Ethan's having a bad day.
It's only Monday. Rob put a question here. Do you weight the accuracy of the data and align that to the accuracy required by the use case? Yeah, 100%, Rob. That's exactly what we do. So we're not talking about that Philex and Qualex. That's how we would do it. For certain use cases, you need high level accuracy, especially if you're communicating with a direct client and it's customized to that individual. Then it had to have as high an accuracy as possible. If we were doing things like, we're just doing a high level segmentation per territory, and it was actually just for planning purposes, but it wasn't connecting with an actual client, then we would drop the accuracy and we would be okay with a lower level of accuracy. But that goes back to what Drew was talking about, metadata as well. We had to have, what's acceptable for different use cases, and that has to be documented. Okay, I think Ethan's trying to come back in.
Let's see.
Ethan?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. It's just a quick question. It's a bit unrelated topic. So, as far as UX discovery things that, well, my profession that I'm doing is sort of on the basis of linking data and AI, and a topic that comes up a lot in sort of the research that I've been doing is around vector databases. I'm not the most well versed on that, so I would like a brief overview or just explanation on data between the two.
So I missed that last part.
It's just I would like just a brief overview on vector databases. It's been a sort of trending area of sort of the AI development at the moment, and I've not yet gotten a sort of substantial explanation around it. And I'd just like some insights.
Okay. Don't know that I would be the best person to answer that. Not sure if anybody else is better equipped.
I don't think that I can answer that. What I would suggest, Debbie, is maybe jot that question down. Let's bounce it off Howard, and maybe he can get back to Ethan with an answer.
Okay.
Sure, definitely.
Ethan, what I can share with you is graph databases. So if you're trying to find relationships between things and you don't know, like you can't write the rules for it, you're just going to drop data sets in and have the relationships kind of emerge, I guess, in a way. Graph databases are great for that. An example of that is, okay, I'm showing my age here. If you still use Facebook, And, you know, it sometimes shows you, it refers a friend of a friend to you to say, do you want to make friends with this person? You probably know them. That's kind of how graph databases work on relationships.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
And if you're looking to play, I think Neo4j is probably the popular one in South Africa that we're using.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Then the longer term wins. And again, this is preaching to the choir. Nobody wants to hear the whole thing about the governance framework, and everybody thinks with AI, you don't need a governance framework. And I found that's the exact opposite. So I've found areas where there's great data science work, but there isn't actually a framework to make it repeatable. And I think, yeah, was it Drew? You mentioned, you know, the attrition of data scientists as well. How do you keep them on board? If you don't have something that's comprehensive from a data governance point of view, then again, it's hard to repeat the work, to hand over the work, to make sure it's being run in a sustainable way. One of the biggest challenges I find is ML ops. How do you actually productionalize a model and fully productionalize it without anybody going there and touching anything? And it's hard. It's really, really hard. I can put that out there. And that excludes the feature engineering, which we know the data scientist has to come back, you know, check the drift of his model, etc. But to actually automate the entire thing, if you don't have this in place, you're not really getting to automation either. And I think that's important. And I think the selling point for businesses is usually that, you know, RPA is everywhere. Everybody wants to automate everything. To do that, you need good data, good quality data. Advanced data quality management. So it's one thing to govern it. For me, the quality management is making it practical. On these are the rules that we're applying. This is what we're doing. This is who's doing what in that framework. So that's really important. And again, I find a lot of cases where people want a quick answer from a data scientist. So it's like, here's the data, just make the magic happen. But if you skip the data quality bits, if you're not checking for the completeness, for what data you actually have, how do you actually trust the end result of the model? So for me, as boring as those pieces are, they're actually 80% of the work, and they actually are still really, really critical. Enhancing the data collection techniques. So, I mean, can you create a way, I don't know if it's a checklist or a framework as well, where when data is coming to your organization, you're asking it enough questions that you can trust it, and where you know there's gaps, you're at least aware of it. So if it is a biased data set, cool, but does it still have a use case we can use? And are we using it with intention? I think the biggest challenge about bias is an unknown. It's something that's not in your conscious thought. So we're trying to take that away with improving how we collect data. Right? And part of the data collection technique could be, do you have a group of individuals who question something before you actually bring the data into your organization? And people from different domains, so wearing different hats. And I think that's sometimes the best way to challenge each other. That was the diversity that I was talking about earlier. Culture, cannot mention this one enough. I spoke earlier about malicious intent around data. Anything you build can still be destroyed by humans, right? We can be our own worst nightmare. So again, if you want consistency in your environment, how do you create a culture around data quality? And I think my key takeaway from this has always been, don't even call it data quality. Like, call it something else that people feel comfortable with, that they can embrace, but they're actually walking away with becoming more data literate. They're understanding more things about why data is important. And I find this becomes effective when you can do show and tells. So the sooner you can visualize your data and start sitting with different experts, whether it's in finance, HR, sales, wherever, that's when you'll start to get buy-in into a data quality culture, when they can actually see the impact to themselves through reports and visualization. And then eventually, we can use AI for data quality. I think, Remco, you mentioned using ChatGPT. I was also playing with putting in data sets and creating data quality there, having it like clean up the data for me. So I've been playing with this as well. And I think it will get more sophisticated as we go. But definitely, we can train models to make our data better. And then the last one has also been a bit of a, what can I say, not quite successful globally, which is setting up an ethics board around data models. I think Google had hired someone, I cannot remember her name now for the life of me, starts with an S. And the minute she disagreed with how the models were being built and the ethics around it, she was asked to find another job. So I think we still have to wrap our mind around what does ethics mean for us and how far we're willing to go when it comes to ethics in AI. And yeah, that's probably the hardest topic, and it's not something we've cracked. It's something that we just need to keep in the back of our minds and figure it out as we go. So that is everything. And am I just on time at 5? Cool.
So Varsha, your point in the previous one about kind of sourcing the data, the advanced data collection techniques, there was also a question earlier about data observability. So I think if you combine really good data quality requirements for those downstream solutions, along with very good, very solid data lineage, data provenance, and you drop on top of it some data observability, and you've done the homework about where is this data coming from, who asked for it, what do they want it for. It all talks to that metadata, and I think at least then you've got a basics to start doing the stuff, and then you can really think about applying those ethics.
100%, Drew. And I think the part that people don't want to hear is all of that takes work. And again, from our observations, 20% is maybe 20% is the fancy data science stuff. Everything else is all this hard work that goes into getting the data right.
And correct. And the last thing you want to have to do is to repeat it over and over because somebody didn't document it or didn't pay particular attention to it, or you delivered a result based on a flawed data.
Exactly. And that can just have, so many consequences to deliver the wrong results. So yeah, that's scary. That keeps me up at night too.
Cool. I've enjoyed the talk. It's rung every important bell for me. I don't know the rest of the audience, if anybody's got any questions, any comments. Rizwana, I see you there. You've gone down this data road a few times. Any questions, any thoughts?
I think, Varsha, you did an excellent presentation, at least from my side. You touched a lot of topics which are spot on. And I'm happy to see that other people are struggling as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to find a group of people, find a tribe. Because I mean, we don't know the answers. This is stuff we have to figure out. And yeah, thank you for that.
I see there's a hand up there from Nuleka.
Thanks, Varsha. Just one question, just around the data quality/processing, right? So given that most of these AI models are really dependent on the quality of your data. So in terms of your data imputation, like, do you have a guide or process, like, to what extent you can impute your data, right? So if you have 60% data completeness, the rest of the 40% you remove from a sample, or do you impute that? Like, do you have a guide on that, like, to ensure that you have good performing AI models?
Yeah, so we keep it because it does depend on the use cases. But it's taken a journey to try and convince my data team as well to do it this way because they were like, it has to be as perfect as possible. But so what we do is we just tag the data, and part of the metadata that Drew was talking about, where's the source? If the source came directly from a client, high trust on that data piece. If it came through from a call center, probably still high trust because it still come from an engagement with the client, but it might be slightly lower because there might be some manual capturing. If it's data we got through a third party, if we do trust, but maybe not as much, we give it a lower rating. So we build in this type of metadata to give us a rating depending on the source, but then also a rating depending on the data quality rules we're running. And then based on that, we can say which use cases can it apply to. So it goes back to if it was high across from a source point of view, plus it's meeting my rules and it's as complete as it's supposed to be, then I can use that for direct connections with my client. If it doesn't meet those things, then I can only use it for general analytics where there's no direct impact to a person. So it really goes back to the use case, but also having as rich metadata as possible.
Yeah, that's what
And I think to build on that, it's the critical aspect of having a service level agreement that is set by the expected users of the data, not the providers. That service level agreement goes to the providers to say, I expect my data to meet these standards.
Yep. And I mean, we have a data service provider right now. It's taken a few months to get to an SLA level. And even that, there's some data that's going to take 6 more months to fix because it's actually going to require manual interventions on their side. But that doesn't mean we're not going to use the data. We're just going to use it for particular use cases. And until the rest of the data completeness is in place, we won't do certain other use cases. So it's really, I think, that observability thing you spoke about, and again, metrics. If you can't change what you can't measure, right? So you have to understand what are the measurements on my data. In fact, your metadata has to be as rich as your data. That's something we don't spend enough time on doing.
So then who do you leave the data cleansing responsibility with? Is it you or is it your source? Because Ngulilek was trying to say, if you have 60% good data, 40 bad data, you chuck the 40 out and you work with the 60, but you don't have sort of a full representative, if you like.
Yeah. And for some use cases, you need a full representative view. Some you don't. So in the example that I gave you about our source, the source is fixing it on their side in that example. But again, you get data from different areas, right? You get some from within your organization. That's where you need clear data owners, you need data stewards, etc., to fix it. So it really does depend on the source. But if it's internal, you really should be driving the model with the data steward and data owner in place.
I got it.
Well, if there's no more questions, there's no more comments, I need to say, Varsha, thank you so much. It's been great to hear somebody else preaching the gospel that the rest of us in Dama are preaching. And yeah, hopefully we'll chat again sometime in the near future.
Awesome.
Debs, you
Thank
want
you.
to wrap up with your normal spiel?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I was hoping Di was still here as our data quality queen, but I see that she has left. So yeah, we do talk about data quality, and I'm sure Varsha will share with us. I know you sent me 2 topics, so I'm looking forward to booking you again. And thank you. This has been really informative and really insightful, and I really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you. Oh, we have one more question from Ethan.
Ethan, you're muted. Debs, can you unmute him?
Sorry, mistake.
Ah.
It's meant to be a wave goodbye.
Yeah. Thank you. Really appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening. Yeah, and we'll share the recording soon.
Thanks everyone for the time. Thanks,
On to the beach.
Debbie. Thanks, Drew. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.